Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our September tutorial, one of our September tutorials for the Integrated Human Studies postgraduate course. We've got several students here from different units, mainly from 5812 and 5810, but this evening we have a very special guest, an IHS graduate alumni, Nikki Robinson, who finished the certificate with us, must have been in 2013, and shortly after that moved into a new career, and we don't know whether that has anything to do with her time with us in IHS or not, but we thought that she would like to come and chat to us about that and take some questions from our students who are here tonight. So maybe over to you, Nikki. Perhaps you could just give us a bit of a brief on the what brought you into IHS in the first place, and your experience in the course and where it took you after that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Angela. It's nice to be back with the postgrad students. The story for me summarily is that I finished, I think it was 2013, and it was November 2013, and about 2 weeks after I finished, I secured a job with the job that I have now, which is with the WWF, which is Worldwide Fund for Nature, also known by a number of different things, but not the World World Wrestling Fund. No. So I don't do any wrestling, but I do work for a non-government organisation which is international and which focuses on not animal welfare, but certainly the welfare of our environment, our habitats, and people and places, and native flora and fauna in those places. So the protection of those, and certainly in Australia, in this region, Australia Pacific, it has specific mandates to take action in certain areas, and I'll come to that in terms of the area that I am in charge of. So my role is I'm the Corporate Communications Manager. I'm based in Melbourne. The head office for WWF is in Sydney, and I think there's probably about 130 staff in Australia. I work full-time, and the role is so my background pre-IHS was over 20 years in advertising and writing, and then over a period of time and some integration with environmental action. I was very keen to change careers from working in the evil advertising industry into something that was actually contributing to the welfare of our planet, as opposed to taking from it. So I had that understanding when I approached IHS that I was making a career change, and in fact whilst I studied, because I did part-time over 2 years, I just did 1 unit per semester, so I was fairly light because I was working at the same time to make an income, and the idea was to get a role in something like a charity, a non-government organisation, but specifically involved in environment, and my particular passion at the time was climate change. Wow. Action on climate change, yeah. So this role, WWF has a specific climate change division, but the role that I have accepted and I'm doing now is specifically working with what's called corporate partnerships team. And WWF has a very interesting approach to changing the world, which is that they recognise, and I do support this idea. They recognise that there are a lot of big businesses which are not only powerful and influential on our planet, they also employ a lot of people, and a lot of people's livelihoods are dependent on the functioning of those corporations for their own survival. So WWF's approach is they work with businesses and they work with people in those businesses rather than against them, rather than opposing them. They do have active campaigns, and they do a lot of policy work and campaign work, for instance, in the Great Barrier Reef. But in this particular area, they are interested in what's called markets transformation, or transforming markets. So transforming their behaviours right along the supply chain from unsustainable behaviours through to sustainable behaviours, which in the particular example that I tend to focus on, which is seafood, so it's kind of drilling down even more. Seafood corporate partnerships is my area of specialty. I work with a number of, I work within the organisation on communications for a number of seafood corporate partners. They are currently Tassal, who breed salmon, so they are aquaculture business based in Tasmania. Blackmores, who have only one product, which is fish oil. So they actually source, and krill, they source obviously stocks of wild caught fish for their product. Another one is Coles, the supermarket chain, and in their seafood division they are attempting to transform all of their sourcing to sustainably sourced fish, seafood, wild caught and farmed. Obviously they stock both. And the final one is John West for the tuna. And I know tonight on Late Line there's this big thing about tuna stocks being seriously endangered. So, and this is not something that's unknown to us in WWF. We have been working with them quite actively, and obviously our focus is a science-based conservation organisation. So we implement projects and policies that work on the ground with right through the supply chain with fishing, like simple villages in third world countries whose livelihoods depend on seafood, right through to big corporations that buy millions and millions of dollars worth of fish and market it, obviously, and trying to do that in a way that doesn't deplete fish stocks to the critical levels that we are facing in a lot of our regions of the planet. So that's what I do in summary. IHS, in terms of a stepping stone to that, I would say has been invaluable. Prior to doing this postgrad course, I had not gone to university, and academic writing was an area where, even though I'd been a writer in advertising for over 2 decades, academic writing was very new to me. So there are a lot of disciplines that are, interestingly, there are similarities, and certainly developing that flexibility is one of them, but also that can translate to the way I develop writing content for science-based information to support my work in WWF. And generally speaking, some of the areas that probably are most relevant in terms of my IHS learnings are the provocative conversations, discussions, disagreements, the challenges that we face as a species, but also to the very different perspectives that each person in the course can bring to looking at a problem, and wicked problems, and understanding some of the complexities of those problems. And they were areas, I can remember it when I started the course, I was like, climate change, climate change, climate change, and all of a sudden I went, oh my goodness, there's all these areas that are absolutely fascinating, and from anthropology right through to food security, through to water, how we relate to each other, religious differences, cultural differences, how do we bring everybody together to understand that a lot of the problems we're facing are universal rather than being isolated to a community, and specific. As they flow down, the flow down effects might be specific to a community. So the people in Pacific Island nations are, quickly learning they don't have much land left, but the problem of climate change, and then obviously sea level rise is a universal, and so you cannot say, oh, that's their problem, it's not mine. So those sorts of things, understanding things from a much more holistic point of view, have been absolutely vital to my ability to receive lots of points of view, and also to drill down to get the sort of the science and what is it we're trying to communicate here, and sticking to that without being emotional. I still do continue a lot of my non-work passions in terms of climate change and action on that, but the disciplines that I learned through the course have been invaluable. One other thing, and Angela will testify to this, I was a very loud or outspoken opponent of some of the points of view that were put forward that technology was going to solve a lot of the problems of the world today. And I came at it from a point of view of technology being a fabulous tool, but it only being a tool. And obviously I'm a bit older too, so I come from a world where, analog everything was kind of how I learned. So there was that natural resistance to change and learning that was there. But also too, I felt that humanity, that the problems of humanity were only going to be solved by human beings, and that some of the technologies that we're talking about in IHS are definitely tools that will facilitate that change, but they are not in themselves solutions. And I don't think that's contrary to what a lot of people have arrived at themselves. But in terms of the work that I do now, both within the organisation, which is, you know, a many-headed beast, and within Australia, for instance, you've got people who are out on the Great Barrier Reef, you've got Indigenous communities who are working as rangers in certain areas, and there's all these different facets of the business. Then you've got people like me in terms of in the communications department, and then conservationists who traditionally think, you know, comms people are a waste of space. So, you know, there's all those sorts of machinations too, and using technology to bring people together who are geographically disparate, but also to maybe ideologically coming from quite different perspectives, so that they can understand the roles that each plays in bringing about, you know, a change that we all agree on. Those sorts of things really have been invaluable. I'm just looking at my notes now because I've done another cup of sip of tea. I just said, must remember, yours isn't the only answer. Yes. And also, which is interesting, because also I think sometimes I have felt emboldened to, you know, change the world, or, you know, why is this so? But what I don't necessarily, or haven't previously taken into account, is that there are thousands of steps before implementing that particular change. And patience, funny thing, but patience is something I learned by understanding that importance of perspectives. And also, too, transformational change comes when lots of people are putting in their perspectives, so that they, you know, they own it. And within our organisation itself, it's going through a big transformational change in terms of our culture and our understanding of how we can use technology to talk to our supporters. So both internally and then on an external facing, it's been absolutely invaluable. The interconnectedness is another thing, and this is another theme I think IHS really shared very well, which is that we can't change things by just talking to one person or one group of people. The knock-on effects of, you know, what we do aren't just because of the nature of the planet today, because of its interconnectedness, so they cannot be approached in isolation. We do have to look at things with a lot more holistic approach, rather than, you know, okay, I'm going to change this one facet, or I'm going to address things from a top-down approach, because there are a lot of different people who can be impacted by anything that you do, and that's another key thing I've learned from my studies. That's it, I think.
Oh, that's a lot of insight there. Actually, just when we're talking about these different perspectives, Nikki, this is something when I talk to other people about integrated human studies is one of our focus. Obviously, we do a lot about getting to know what it means to be human and our human capacity to think and act and be agents of change and all that kind of stuff. But I've always felt that that aspect of understanding that there are many different worldviews, that people all have different worldviews, and to even understand what our own ones are, not just one, we have many. I've also thought that that's quite a big part of IHS, and that so when you're talking to people, that everybody's is valid, everybody's way of seeing things is valid, and I think you might be validating that idea that that's actually been helpful to you, especially bringing that patience aspect.
Yep.
So I'll keep sounding that message then if it's true. It's great. Look, we might take some questions from everybody. Maybe we'll just start with Ellie, because she's got a hand up.
Oh. That sounds fantastic. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Nikki. That sounds fantastic, and I really appreciate, I'm sure we all do, that you taking the time to join us. One thing that struck me with through your talking is that we often don't consider other people's perspectives, particularly people that are sort of at the tail end, and I guess we're all trying to change that. But I was just wondering, would like a little mini IHS course help in getting people on the same page and sort of understanding about other perspectives? Because it sounds like that could be a little bit tricky in your role, maybe.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Good question. My answer to it is initially is that it's kind of a slow leak thing that happens. To me, it's not. It's an implicit part of the course as opposed to an explicit part. So you have your week-to-week learnings, but through one of the key things, and I think Sarah will bear me out, that each semester you've got a different group of faces. You have some of the same, but you are, by the nature of the structure of the course, it invites collaboration and it invites people to put forward their opinions, and you really do get a sense that each is equal. And also, too, we have the benefit of, and this is the benefit of internet learning, is that you have such a cultural diversity and, geographical diversity of people who do this training, that it forces you to go. I remember one of the semesters I did, there was a guy based in, I don't think it's Damien, it was in South Korea, and he was talking about the problem of abandoned pets for expats. So you go over to South Korea to work, you're lonely, you get a pet, and then you are relocated somewhere else. What happens to the animal, And it's such a, to me, it's a beautiful sort of a potted example of really understanding that there are, deep issues that affect people all over the planet that may not necessarily affect someone else, and having a respect for that, having a respect for the opinions of people. And, there are people in countries or with political or religious philosophies that aren't necessarily my own, but they're equally, as Angela said, they are equally valid. And that comes down to an organisation like WWF, where you've got people who are, I have not met a person who's there for the wrong reasons. When I say wrong reasons, that's a judgment as well. But everybody seems to be quite, motivated by their own set of values. They are values-based decisions that they make. So you find that if you ask questions in WWF, I've never encountered in my life, in my entire career in advertising, I've never seen anything like it, but you get floods of opinions back. And it happens because people are so engaged with the issues. And it's important to remember all of those responses. You've asked for them. It's not a dictatorship, but also and they are part of the culture that is WWF. So in 20 years' time, it will migrate according to the population of the staff who run it. But certainly today, those issues must be. You have to pay attention to them. So to answer your question, Ellie. To do it in a podded way, to do a shorter course, runs the risk of that natural seep of an understanding. And for me, it was like I hope to think I've been a fairly open-minded person in the past, but it kind of challenged me to go, well, actually, you think there's this, and this reality, and they're all of the realities, and it's great that you acknowledge all those realities, but what about this, and this? Things you hadn't even considered before. We did a part of our course was studying are they called nanobots, the ones that go into your body and can diagnose illness, and and they bring forward, and this whole thing is the singularity and using technology so transhumanism and that whole sort of thing, that actually raised within me ethical kind of conundrums where I could see the logic and the the importance of that sort of progress, but it raised huge ethical issues within me personally, and I know it created some fabulous discussions amongst the group, because sometimes you actually don't have an opinion yet because you're like, I don't know how I feel about this, and then you find, through discussion and through absorbing other points of view, you come to some understanding. We did another thing on Coney, that guy in, is it the DRC? No, it's not the DRC. That horrible bad guy in Africa.
Uganda.
Yeah, now not in Uganda, and we looked at that as a campaign sort of activating sort of social conscience and then involving people from all around the world to try and find this Coney guy, and then people put forward opinions in the in the feedback, and they were perspectives I hadn't even thought of. I was kind of, I can't even remember what my initial sort of viewpoint was, but really there were people questioning the, I guess, trial by, group, trial by planet, and lots of different sorts of angles on that stirred up in me thoughts and ideas that I hadn't previously even considered. So to me, that does take time, because you're developing an understanding of points of view, but it's a constantly evolving thing. And I would actually say one of my major concerns was that online study would prevent that or limit that, and I would still say face-to-face would be is always going to be stronger, but I was actually surprised by how much I learned about those different perspectives through an online space.
Well, this is kind of face-to-face, really. I mean, all you can see are our faces.
Yes.
So it certainly it's a kind of mediated face-to-face, but I think if we didn't have these opportunities with tutorials, it might be a little bit more the way you had imagined it. But I think doing it this way certainly certainly brings that different element into it, to a degree.
No, I agree.
We might have some more questions. Damien, do you have anything?
Yes, I do. Hi, Nikki. Thank you very much for that. I did find that, I found that very interesting. One of the things I'd be interested in knowing is obviously, you know, working for, the Worldwide Fund for Nature. You know, you have moved very much into the space of the things that we talk about in this course. Can I don't know whether I'm asking too much here, but I'd be interested to know what, say, 3 of the things that you've most benefited from in the move, but I'd also be really interested to know maybe 3 of the things that weren't what you expected, because I'm sure there is hardship there as in any job, and I just, having not worked in such an area, I'd be quite interested to hear that.
I'm not sure I can say 3. One of the things I can say is I actually love what I do, which is the first time I could say that for 20 years. So that's a pretty big one. And I'm proud of what I do. And that might sound a bit kind of gushy or whatever, but to actually, you know, say to somebody, I work for these people, regardless of the feedback I get, and I do get very positive feedback, I am proud that I'm investing my intelligence and time and commitment to something that I'd actually genuinely feel quite deeply about. So I think the importance of that, and I can remember when I was a kid saying to my dad, who was an airline pilot, you must love he's an international pilot, you must love what you do flying all over the world. And he said, no, I hate it. I do it because I'm financially committed to the hilt. And I can remember being shocked as a kid that anyone would do a job that they didn't absolutely love, and then I started doing a job I didn't absolutely love. So that's probably one of the biggest pluses. Another area is I have a hunger for knowledge, and I don't know whether that's just me but I'm just learning every single day. So the work that I do, I'm learning about a specific area of work. It's not just seafood. I do learn about corporate partnerships with companies that use wood and paper products. And so there's lots and lots of things that interest me all the time, so it keeps me interested. Some of the downsides, I probably would have to say, I mean, I knew I was taking a massive pay cut going into an NGO. I couldn't care less. I can't say that everybody's in such a privileged position to feel that way, but certainly money has not ever been the main driver for me, and a lot of people, I mean, even in my interview, the people said, gee, the interviewers said, we're concerned that, you know, you'll be taking a very big pay cut, and I said, you know, whatever, and, you know, I still feel that way. So I've got plenty of money to survive. I'm not worried one little bit. So I'm lucky in that sense. But one thing I didn't expect is that working in this space, because you're working on a values-based motivation rather than paycheck-based, you do put in a huge amount of time, physical time, but also emotional investment, and it can be draining. And I know someone from another organisation who's a friend of mine, another NGO from ACF, talked about the hope budget, what they called the hope budget. And I thought, oh, you know, wanky words. But I now actually understand, like, you do need to have a hope budget, which is that kind of you continually feel like, you know, you're getting somewhere and that the work that you're doing. And sometimes you hear, you know, government policy makes an announcement that they're going to drop the carbon tax, or they do this, and it's quite gutting, because there you are working at the coalface trying to make good things happen, and then you get this sort of feedback, or you get feedback that, you know, no, the general public thought that in 1997 thought climate change was one of the most pressing issues at that time. Now it's kind of like budget. They're really concerned about the economy, and you're like, but we're living in a rich country. Australia's a rich country. You know, what do you mean? But, you know, you're worried about economics. But there are people who do it tough. So, you know, sometimes you can feel a bit knocked by those things because you do take them personally, because that's why you're doing what you do. And so I'm aware, you know, sometimes you can feel quite, yeah, you feel emotionally invested in what you're doing. So that's a great thing, but it can be a liability as well if you don't look after yourself.
We might have to put an extra week's module into 5812, I think, on the Hope budget because, you know, I think everybody doing this course, and I relate to what you're saying a little bit, teaching in this course, it's, you know, all the same principles for me extended from being a student and then to being tutoring in it. It's the same kind of thing. You know, you feel that you're trying to move everybody, you know, that's in this little group. And I know today there's a lot of people listening because on my phone I can hear this buzzing. So there's a lot of people watching this little hangout right now, and you think, oh, you know, you're moving everybody in a certain direction, and then yes, as you say, that your hopes can be dashed. So okay, the Hope budget, an extra, an extra unit there.
And part of the reason I've come and talk to you tonight is because I actually that to me is so important that I can just be a person who says, you can do this course and that you can win and that you can implement the things that you learn in a real and practical way, because, you know, sometimes you can study and think, oh my God, you know, yes, I'm building a body of knowledge and all those things are good, but for me, and I was very overt about this when I first started the training, was that my purpose was to get a job in this field. So I just wanted to reiterate and say that persistence, and I was very persistent, and I learned it was very character building, I think is the expression we like to use, in terms of the number of rejections I got before I actually got this job. Like I was fairly determined. So, and I just wanted to say to anybody who feels sometimes like their hope budget in terms of what it is they want out of the course itself, sometimes they feel a bit flattened. Don't be. I
think you're a bit of a shining example though, because you didn't kind of go advertising IHS WWF. You know, along the way, you did a bit of woofing. You had a major changes. I know this through your discussions. You know, you had major changes in your lifestyle, but you also became you know, Al Gore's climate warrior there, and you know, this was IHS was one of a number of things. So it wasn't, you know, just quick change. You know, it was an evolution in many areas of your life.
Absolutely true. And I mean, I'm lucky in the position that I can, because I don't have kids and I don't have a lot of I don't have financial commitments that prevent me from, you know, having that flexibility. And I have a partner who he just says, do what makes you happy. So I'm extremely lucky that I have those sorts of supports, because I know they are luxuries, but I also know, and I said this to many people too, because I quit my high fly job in advertising, as Angela says, well before I started IHS, and I went overseas for a year, and people were saying, oh, you can't do that. And I said, well, I'm going to just walk away from technology. And they said, what do you mean? You know, no computer, no GPS. I said, no, nothing. And I say I did that, but and you know, we've made a book out of it. But that's not a plug for a book, by the way. That's just to say we created something out of this, because we actually said to people, don't believe that you can't do something. What we did may not be what you want to personally do, but the lie is that you can't do it. And particularly in a construct of a Western society, and for those who aren't who aren't living in these sort of surrounds, you know, we took a lot of time setting up the dominoes so we could do what we did, but it can be done. And I
think this emphasises this element that you brought in before, Nikki, is time. You know, everything these days we expect such instant results.
Yep.
But there's a lot to be said for time and patience and evolution of things, evolution of ideas and actions. It just doesn't happen in an instantaneous time frame, does it?
Yeah.
We might have some more questions. Sorry, Kelly, I think I might have forgotten to invite you in. Hi. I hope you've managed to catch a bit with Nikki. You can always watch the recording later. Does anybody else, Sarah, do you have any questions of Nikki?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the culture at WWF, and you said that it's a very values-based organisation and one that allows opinions and allows people to have their own say, their own world views, which in many cases could lead to complete chaos. But I wonder how that works with the culture of the organisation and certainly the decision-making in the organisation, and how does the organisation determine what is most important of all the things that they have to do?
Good one, thank you. The overview of it is that as a worldwide organisation, they have an international charter of action, and if you go on their website, you'd see that. In Australia, what they've done is they've just keep drilling down, and the new CEO, reasonably new since 2007, has a very strong strategic background. He's very a real strategic player. So from what I understand, prior to my arrival, they sort of said, we can't solve all the problems of the world. It's not, we don't have the resources, which is the people or the money. They might have even have the expertise, but the other two, we just don't have them. So we're going to focus on 5 key areas in Australia, and within these areas, 5 key issues within those areas. So now I'm going to ask me which the areas are. But one of them is the Coral Triangle, which is a region that includes Borneo above Australia. I didn't even know what the Coral Triangle was when I started. I was like, well, that sounds nice. Might go there one day. So that's one area. South, it's called SWAE, which stands for Southwestern Australia. I can't remember what the E is for, but it's a section of where there's a quite intense biodiversity. And basically, if you look at the map of Australia, it's down there. Great Barrier Reef is another one, and obviously that's one getting a huge amount of attention at the moment. I can't off the top of my head think of the others, but they are kind of key regions with issues specific to those regions, and they focus on those. And Great Barrier Reef is an excellent example because, as you guys would all know, there's a lot of talk about what's going on and in the Great Barrier Reef region, and of course, you know, the massive proposed expansion of Abbott Point. So they have been actively campaigning, along with a lot of other NGOs, about not destroying that World Heritage listed area and some of the challenges that are being faced there. So that's one region. In terms of what I do, corporate partnerships, they have basically drilled down and said, right, there are 7 key commodity areas where we're going to put our attention. They are beef, there's production of beef, sugar, seafood, water, timber and paper products. Oh, you're going to ask me now. Palm oil, and there's one more, and whoever it is will probably hate me forever. But anyway, those are the kind of key areas that are the key areas where the impacts are the greatest environmentally. So we target specifically corporate businesses that work in the top echelons of the supply chain affecting those commodities. So it tends to be quite focused in terms of the strategy with which we approach, the issues, and then they basically, I guess they do it by developing roundtables of discussions where they say, okay, the issue we have is overfishing in wild caught stocks. That's one issue, and then a totally separate issue is aquaculture, which is a massively growing industry. About 2 billion people, I think it is, on the planet rely on seafood as the primary protein source, and this is only going to increase. So we really need to look at aquaculture and how we can develop that industry sustainably. And then people who have interests and passions in that area within the organisation would form a roundtable and say, okay, some of the key issues are X, Y, Z, and basically develop policies. Those policies are ratified by the board, WWF, and then that becomes kind of a template, if you like, for the way we act. So they kind of set these structures in place, and they do it on an annual, well, they're constantly evolving things, but they are reviewed on an annual basis because situations do change. And in the corporate partnership area, it's a very new area for WWF to actually engage with businesses. And a lot of people, I remember I said my first question isn't like, aren't we sleeping with the enemy? The enemy I used to work for. By engaging with corporates, and the point of view that was, came back to me was, in fact, it's a TED Talk if anyone's interested in this area. A guy named Jason Clay, who, if you write his name down, C-L-A-Y, and check his TED Talk, he's done a really fantastic, I think it's about 15, 20-minute talk, which talks about transforming markets. And they've got this kind of champagne glass where they're looking at 7 billion consumers and this many companies, and it's all too overwhelming. But when you actually narrow it down, you'll find out that there's actually a very small number of, like, the largest corporations control 70% of business, and those are the ones they target, the big guys who have the most influence, because then they'll have knock-on influences to the smaller players in the everything.
We like this, Nikki, because this is actually our weekly topic in 5812. Actually, I don't remember that one in working with business. I think our resources are the World Bank and IMF, and it always does bother me somewhat when I look at that week and think, forces for good and forces for evil, but that's what we kind of have to balance up, because they're there. So you're delivering the lecture for this week. Thank you.
Well, that's okay. There's on the Australia site, on the landing page, there's a little bit. I can't remember not looking at it, but it says about WWF on the right-hand side of the drop-down bar that says working with business, and that'll give you a little summary or a couple of paragraphs about why they work with business. And that video by Jason Clay is actually a very compelling talk about why you would engage with businesses, because of the fact you can't stop them. They're not going to go away. They're not going to stop making stuff.
Good. That will enter the resources belatedly for this week. Actually, it's only Tuesday. It's not too late. We'll add it in. That way everybody can watch it. Terrific. Well, Florence might have a question, because Florence is going to be doing her project on the Abbott Point coal port there. Do you have anything? She can't do your project for you, Florence, but you might have a pertinent question for her. We're there, Florence? You're muted?
Unmuted.
Unmute.
I was just going to say the big business thing is a subject of the 5810 as well this week.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, so that was very interesting. I was just looking it up on my other computer while we were talking. About the Abbott Point, yes, I'm not quite sure what to ask this, because I haven't done enough research into it yet. So I haven't got in. But I was thinking, well, that'll be a good place to start looking, is the website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
WWF has quite a lot of information. In fact, I know from as an Australian citizen a lot about what's going on, and I'm interested in the newspaper reports, and we get internal updates, such as the fact that Adani, the Indian company, has now said they won't dump dredged spoil into the water, but the big question is, so where will they dump it? So that's just happened today, as I understand. So I'm sort of up on it like that, but I actually don't have much of an in-depth understanding of the work that's being done there.
But that's a good start, Florence, to be able to be directed to that website, which is great. Lorena, have you got anything you'd like to ask Nikki?
I would like to work with you. What do I have to do? No, it's amazing the job that you are doing. I'm a marine biologist, and I would like to work probably with an ONG someday.
Yes,
so
great. Yeah.
Very interesting to listen to you, and you inspire me. So I'm happy. No, I don't have any question. I'm so happy to listen to you.
Lorena, how long do you have to finish? You're doing your Masters at UWA. How long do you...
Yeah, this is my last semester. I'm doing my final project in climate change. And I used to work with the government in Colombia, and I used to work with communities, and I know how hard it is. How hard it is to protect the environment, and also in Colombia we have the corruption is so huge, and sometimes I was so frustrated because I want to do a lot of things, but I couldn't because the corruption didn't allow me, and I always was fighting with my boss and with everybody inside to the environment department, and I decided to resign, and I came to Australia to study. So I changed. Next year on December I'm going to move to New Zealand to live.
there, so I hope to find something there that I can do and enjoy.
Good on you. Good luck. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Maybe you can be inspired by Nikki's message about persistence and that it's not happening overnight, and that you might get there.
Yes, I'm a person that I don't give up.
Good.
I always try and try and try, and most of the time I could achieve my goals. So you inspire me. Thank you.
Inspire me too. Good on you.
We just haven't heard from Kelly. Kelly, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, terrific. You just have a frozen picture, that's all. Did you have anything to ask Nikki?
No, but I'd just like to reiterate what Lorena said about it's really inspiring to hear that you've been able to get such an awesome job. Yeah, I'm jealous. That's about it.
You can do it. You can do it. Kelly, you should. I mean, I was the most under-equipped person I can imagine. So if I can do it, anyone can. I was even. All my friends said to me when I got the job, "Really?" And they loved it.
They didn't know how good you were. We could see it in IHS that you're just perfect for it. So you mustn't show them that side so much. That's terrific. I think one of the books that we might have read while you were a student was Paul Gilding's The Great Disruption book. Were we all reading that at the same time? Because I think that he was a friend of Tracy Taylor, who's also a student in the course, and he'd written that book, and I think we all kind of read it at the same time. But he also had been involved with WWF and different movements, Friends of the Earth and things. But that was his big message. And that was what he ended up doing, was kind of moving in working with business instead of fighting against it to implement change. So I guess it's a fairly consistent message, isn't it? That either way, whether we're business or government or anything else, we actually all have to work together.
Yeah. Implement from the inside rather than try and change from the outside.
Yep. Another formative book I read, Angela, which I don't know if anyone else has read, it's coming from a different angle. But it's really about the hope. It's talking about hope budget. It's a writer named Paul Hawken, and he wrote a book called Blessed Unrest. And it's really about the rise of the movement, which you see Occupy and Arab Spring are a part of that, which is where there's not a uniform head. It's not an autocratic sort of structure of a movement where people are leading the way and others are following, but very much this organic sort of growing, developing, changing, transmogrified group of people who feel deeply about something but can't be basically squashed, because it's almost, they do exist, but that they are evolving constantly. And his book, he came to Australia last year, and I reported on his talk because it was a job that I had. And I thought it was just the cat's pajamas. But, boy, he's like oozing with hope. And, very worthwhile.
What's the name of that book? What was that called, Nikki?
Blessed Unrest. And
sorry, I missed that first word, sorry.
Oh, it's a funny word. Blessed, B-L-E.
Oh, blessed. Blessed, sorry.
I don't think he's religious. I don't think he's, if he is, I didn't pick it up. And his name's Paul Hawken, Hawken. He's kind of an entrepreneur, an American entrepreneurial type.
We'll pop that in the unit so everybody can get access to that. Look, that's terrific. This has been really wonderful. I mean, wonderful for us to see your, progressing on from IHS in such a positive way. And as everybody else is saying, you got you kicked the goal. You got the dream job at the end of it. I mean, so it's great to see that for you, but it's also great for everybody to see that that's a possibility for them as well. Very inspiring indeed. Well, look, Nikki's been wonderful speaking to us for 3/4 of an hour here with just one cup of tea, which is fantastic. But do we have any more questions quickly before we let Nikki go make another cup of tea?
I've got to go and stand in the bathroom.
No, but look, I think that might be it. Look, we're really grateful. It's just been wonderful having you here. But I think we put that up. I don't know if you're still in the G+ group and if you follow these things, but you'll be able to see it there. And I often put these tutorials, I don't put them on private, but I put them on unlisted just so they're not just splattered everywhere. But we might leave this one on just full public view just so that you can take it and use it.
I'll tell my mum.
Tell your boss. You've been a very great advocate for the organisation. Yeah. You might get a raise. That'd be nice.
That would. Not my final job.
Yeah. Anyway, look, terrific. Thank you so much, Nikki. If you've got the effects going, Damien, you can press the clap. I noticed you getting the effects there. That's terrific. Thank you so much. Fabulous.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Nikki. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Good luck, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So we've got now 13 minutes. 13 minutes for projects. How are we going to do this? That was terrific. Very, very informative and inspiring. Damien, we're going to come to you last because you got the most tricky one, okay? I'm not even going to ask Sarah because I haven't seen hers up in the project forum, so I'm going to let you off the hook.
It is. No, it is.
Oh, you've put it
but
up?
only very recently, yes.
That's right. No, I did see it. Sorry. That's right.
Okay.
It is recently. Well, Florence and Sarah are both doing the 5-8-10 scenario planning. So do you have anything that you need to speak about at the moment, or are you managing at this point?
I think I'm fine at the moment. I just sort of still seeding the idea, so looking at the future of public transport and then narrowing it down to very selfishly my own train line. And I'll have a further look at what I'm going to do later, so no, I don't have anything much at the moment.
Yeah, I think the best thing is, and this goes for everybody too, make sure you read everybody else's, apart from contributing to everybody else's project forum posts. You know, usually it's the same advice all the time I'm giving. So if you look at everybody else's, you'll pick up little hints that'll apply to yours as well. Just seems to be that there's similar approaches that we all have when we take a research project on, and we sort of seem to go down the same kind of divergent paths and have to be brought back to the main path in the same way. I'm sorry it's repetitive, but yes, we're just creatures of habit, and human nature's not that dissimilar. So yeah, I would say that. But yeah, I think it's still early days yet. So those ideas will kind of flourish as we go. Everybody else is in 5-8-12, apart from Ellie. We'll get into about 5-8-11. How are you going with yours, Lorena? You had quite a change of project there. You managing with this new idea that you have?
With me?
Yes. How are you going with your project?
Yeah. I was planning to work with Cost Care Cotaslow. That is an organization, a group, a volunteer organization that wants to care the cost of Cotaslow. I want to know how they engage the community, what they are doing. I don't know, because you told me that I don't have to. I don't want to say if they are doing well or bad their job. I only want to know how they are doing and what mechanism they have to engage people and to have the money that they need to do all the projects that they want to do. I think they start in 1995, so I think I can have a lot of information from them.
I'm sure Neville wouldn't mind me telling you, but one of the things that, as you all know, Neville likes to sort of put the cat amongst the pigeons sometimes and think of things differently. But, you know, he often says, you know, what sort of people are in your group? You know, what are they doing in that organisation? Are they there because they all want to get together and do some knitting once a month at their meetings, or are they motivated for social reasons? Are they motivated? You know, what's actually motivating them to be in those sort of groups? That's often a good thing, because I think one of the things that we do know that often groups get infiltrated by people who might have a different agenda from the actual mission. So it's often good to just, you know, think about not just what the group is doing, but, you know, what sort of people get involved in the group and what sort of activities do they like to focus on? Do they, you know, are they all kind of in agreement? And I don't know how you find those things out in a case study. Obviously you have to be quite careful. But those sorts of questions as well are interesting ones to ask. And they can certainly make a fairly straightforward looking case study can make it a bit more interesting. Anyway, having that human element in it. So how are you going with yours, Kelly?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we've had a brain freeze there. You there, Kelly? We might come back to Kelly in a second. I don't know if you can hear Kelly, but you've frozen for the second. I'll pop over to Ellie for a second. We'll come back to you. Ellie?
Yeah, I haven't given my project any thought since I put my first posts up. I think my 5812 is on track. My 511, I'm looking at a survey for whether people who engage in pro-environmental behaviours in the home makes them happier. I read a report about it. I thought, oh, that sounds great. It ties in with my other project. But I think I've been avoiding it because I'm sort of wondering if it's actually really worth it. So I have to have some more thinking around that one, whether I change it slightly or something like that. Yeah.
Well, it's early days yet, so I mean, I guess you've got two to focus on. But if you're going to be sending out a survey, that's the bit you don't want to leave too late, because by the time people get around to answering it and you get that data in, at least if you get the survey bit out, then you've got a bit of a break while, you know, that's being delivered. I was thinking about your 5812 project. Sarah, can you remember in 5812, was it Nikki who made the little film about this kind of action group that was involved in the house? Remember, it was a little video and she filmed them coming.
No.
What did you do in 5812? Did you do the action on McDonald's?
Yes, I did. So what did Nikki do? I can't remember.
It was like a Ellie's doing something similar. It was like a group that comes and can give you advice on your sort of sustainability in your home or something.
I don't remember that.
Maybe I had a dream. I'll have a look and see if I can find it. But it was very
talking about though, because they do still turn up with shower heads and light bulbs and stuff. It was a government initiative quite some time ago, I think. But I don't remember Nikki's project. I'm sure if I look back, I'd remember it, but I just don't remember it off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, I think somebody had filmed them at the back door or the front door coming in, and it was quite clever. I'll see if I can find that. I'll put that on my list of things. But that could be helpful, inspiring for you anyway, Ellie. Okay.
Thank you.
I've got a bit of a list here. Okay. Have we got Kelly back on again? Is Kelly back in?
Yep. Can you hear me
Kelly,
now?
Yep.
Okay. My project is a case study on the Friends of Star Swamp Bushland, which is also hooks in with Coast Care and the City of Stirling, and there are a number of friends groups that work to conserve the bushland along the coast, I suppose, a little bit north of Cottesloe. So I just went to one of our weeding days on the weekend, so I had a chat to a couple of people, but I don't know how much information I'm going to need or whether I'm going to be able to get it. So that, I suppose, is my big worry at the moment, is I need to work out what I need to know, and then whether I'm able to, whether, you know, there's that data available, I suppose.
Most people are delighted to help from a group. You'll find somebody that will be happy to help. And sometimes, if they've been quite proactive in the publicity area, they'll have kept kind of scrapbooks and things of newspaper articles and that kind of stuff, which is quite helpful.
This book, which is just like this huge, massive thing of letters to council and how they got it classified as an A-class reserve, but it's all back in the 80s, whereas if I just go, well, were they successful in the 80s? Well, they were, because they got it classified as an A-class reserve, but I'm kind of looking at whether they're currently doing any good or not, so...
well, there might be. I mean, that in itself could be interesting. You know, I mean, obviously there's many approaches you can take, but say, for example, they had a good roll-up in the 80s and they were really proactive and they got all this stuff done. I mean, maybe back in the 80s there was more environmental degradation and there was something that kind of galvanised the community to take some action. Maybe if you just look at what's happened to their membership, if their membership's up or down, or maybe the memberships, maybe there's another group in the area that's captured everybody's imagination. They want to go and knit over there instead of knitting with this one, or whatever it is they do. Maybe Landcare's competing. You know, when I did 5812 with my group had actually been very much, I wouldn't say infiltrated, but joined by one of the Transition Towns movement. It was a climate action group, and you know, all the people from transition had come into it, and there was a little bit of competing ideology. One group really wanted to talk just about climate change. The others didn't want to mention climate change because they felt that that was too catastrophic and put people off. So there were a couple of competing ideologies which made it hard for them to go forward. So you can find out those sorts of things by talking to people, even casually, while you're pulling weeds out with them, you know, and it's that kind of inside information. Obviously, we can't all do that for a case study, but if you're in there, that's one of the benefits of just actually finding out what is going on, because they could just say, look, you know, everybody's, you know, getting too old, they've all got arthritis, they don't want to do the physical part, so they've joined a group that's less physical, or, you know, there could be all sorts of things.
But so everybody in this group seems to be over 70.
Well, and you know, that's one of the things too. You know, that you can get a lot of statistics on volunteering and age groups that volunteer, and so maybe with, you know, obviously the age group that's really high in volunteering are people in their 60s and 70s, and it tails right off in the 80s. But I think that there are statistics on the type of volunteering they do, and it becomes less physical as they get older. So, you know, maybe that's what's happened. You've had that shift in ageing. Maybe they're the same people that have always been members, but as they've got older, they, you know, perhaps they're not as engaged with new media to get the message out. Perhaps they don't want to bend down and pick out the weeds. All sorts of reasons why it might have lost its vitality, if indeed that's what's happened. You know,
well, they don't even have a website at the moment. Like, their website is down because of some domain issue, and I'm just going, nobody doesn't have a website anymore, and they just don't seem to care.
Well, you can either keep persisting with them if you want to help, or find another group quick smart if it's too unexciting for you to do. But, you know, whether that will help them or not, you know, if you were to do something that would suggest that, you know, you could get a website and, you know, have a bit of a media presence, but, you know, maybe that's just going through one of those kind of cycles. All clubs and membership, you know, groups have cycles, so you could just be having one of those. But yeah, I guess you can still do a snapshot of where it's at the moment, and that will tell you something about it as well. But yeah, I guess when you want to do something that's really kind of exciting, and you find out your group's a bit dull, you'll have to work that one out, I think, for yourself. Okay, look, shall we move to Damien, because he's got the hot topic of the week here, and we've got to keep him alive during this project.
You know, I actually only have one question that I nearly got to anyway, which is, you know, the bit I want to treat this with a level of sympathy, like, and that's not because of the actions that ISIS take in the end, but, you know, people don't take up arms without a good reason usually. Now, I'm still yet to see whether I can find that reason there and understand it, but, you know, one of the things I'm one of the things, people must be able to research topics that they don't necessarily agree with the outcomes and write it in a way. I think that's the thing that I haven't quite got my head around. Every time I go to write something about it, I kind of go to apologise first and say, oh, I don't agree with what they do, and then go into it. I wonder, are there any techniques for how do you do that?
Look, I think you've got to look at the history. I think you've got to look at the birth of this organisation, because it's quite a fairly substantial action to go over and take over a country, really, isn't it? And so we are live to air, so we should be a little careful. But I think that there's a root of this movement that you might like to focus on, that historical aspect as to what it is born of. And a little bit like I was saying before, groups do get infiltrated. I mean, there may well be a more kind of fundamental group that may have started this, that the agenda may well have been diverted by other groups with other grievances or other agendas or ambitions that have come into it. That might be something you would discover if you can approach it from that. And I certainly think that it's not a sympathetic viewpoint. I think you can definitely take this from that base position that we would come from in IHS as human well-being, that this may well have arisen and probably has from a real grievance, a real and genuine grievance. That's where you probably need to start to look, which would tie it in quite well with what our aims are, and I can see that yours are definitely along that line. Anyway, you come from, when we know you come from that fundamental position. So maybe your case study, you could focus on the here and now and the recruitment and the finances and stuff, but you could make this a more historical, you could give it a more historical emphasis if you wanted to, if that was of interest to you to do that. And certainly that area of the world has a very long and deep history. I mean, it's hard for me to not, every time I see the news at the moment, to think of your project, but there was somebody in the Senate, I think, today saying we need to redefine the word terrorist. I don't know if anybody saw that. And he was sort of cried down quite quickly, and he just said, to the people who are in a country, any force coming in are seen as terrorists. We as Australians might well be seen as terrorists in these countries. We think we might need to change the word that we use, change the descriptor. So, I mean, it's a difficult subject to talk about. It's very easy for everybody to pounce on that chap. Wish I could think of his name now. Very easy to pounce on him and say, oh, and have all this patriotic jingoism going on, and how dare you say that sort of stuff. But these things do need to be aired and talked about. So I guess if you, certainly if you want to take that approach, I think you should.
I think that's actually a good idea, like focusing on the history and building it from that perspective can stop me from getting into worrying too much about the violent end versus how this came up and what created this group and what brought them together and what's attracted people to it. So yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, the formation. And look, I certainly, because we had a lot of students from Iraq previously in the unit, and they would all, with all their projects, with all their forum posts, with every essay they wrote, it's just absolutely traumatized people about what had happened in their country, and we're talking 2003. But, over the course of studying and learning with them, you started to realize there was a very long history to what they were talking about, and that this is nothing new. A lot of these things are not new, and they're certainly not well understood by most of us in the West. And so I think that a much deeper understanding of where these things stem from would certainly be useful to you and great for us to read as well. So I think that that would be a good perspective, if that helps.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Thank you very much.
That's fine. Okay, well look, we're 6 minutes over, but I think that's okay. It's been a pretty good tutorial having Nikki coming and speaking to us, I think. So we should probably wind up unless anybody else has anything else to add or ask before we go.
Oh, I was just going to add that did you hear that report about the English fighters are going over who are joining that group? It's just the excitement of, you know, being part of, you know, just going to war like young men like to do. Not necessarily the ideology. Did you hear that report? That was last week I heard that one.
Well, yeah, we've had that conversation in our house because I asked the question: do video games like Call of Duty, which so many people play, does that make it look like, yeah, sure, we can all go and do this for real? I don't know if there's a connection there or not, but it certainly takes a, yeah, it does look exciting. War's always been exciting for certain young men, hasn't it? I mean, it's like when we're looking at the centenary of World War I, that was the big thing, go for an adventure. So you have to wonder how much is ideology, how much is adventure, and probably another aspect of a fairly unrealistic expectation that people don't die in war as much as they used to. That's the thing I think the video game might add to it, it's the fact that it's not real. Who would know? It's complex, and I guess we just know what we see in the paper. We don't really know what's actually happening, do we? Great tragedy, though. And well, look, you know, Damien, you might uncover some of these things. You might be able to look at who the participants are. You know, there's a lot of movements in other.
Yeah. And interestingly, you know, if you have got a group of people that are out to have an adventure, it'd be nice if you could attract them to dealing with climate change and looking after people. So, you know, whatever might be motivating people, if it's an adventure, you know, interestingly, if that's what attracts people, maybe that's what's lacking, you know, attempts by, you know, groups that are trying to tackle climate change. They don't attract those people, and they're the people who are most likely to want to get in there and do something.
And we don't actually know how many people actually have gone there. They tell us 60, 100, and then therefore they're going to shut the internet down and monitor all our emails. And I mean, we don't know if there's any at all. There might be none. Who would know?
And it does. I mean, the membership numbers are. It depends what read as to what those numbers are as well. You know. So.
Well, the first casualty of war is truth. Is that not it? So yes. you always have to bear that one in mind.
Yeah.
Who would know? So yeah, I think we just have to keep watching. And I think certainly when we had students in the course from Iraq that were able to shed some light on what had happened in 2003, it certainly wasn't what we understood to have happened. You know, their personal experiences were quite astonishing. In fact, we had a wonderful discussion where two of them, and one of them had just graduated, and I think it was in Mosul, I can't remember, and one of them had said, can you remember that he just graduated but he couldn't go to his graduation because the war had just started, and they wanted to rush and get his graduation certificate before the country was, you know, kind of really going down that war path. And they said they were, you know, do you remember we were driving in there and the power lines were all down because they were kind of laying siege to wherever it was, and, you know, just sort of witnessing this in our forums was just extraordinary. That personal experience, all to get the degree. I thought that was it was very interesting, but certainly, you know, it didn't line up with anything that I'd kind of seen on the news. That's for sure. So, yeah. I guess that's the other thing you've got to think, Damien, when you're doing it, is how you get information. WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks. You have to go there and have a look. Yeah. Okay, look, we might call it a night, and I don't think we've got that many people down for Thursday, so if you want to join us again for Thursday, I think there's some spots there. There usually are. I don't think we've ever managed to overfill it. Doesn't matter how many we want, we all seem to. And there's a big long space at the bottom, so maybe it'll take 15. Never mind. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. It's been a great tutorial, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye,
Angela.
everybody.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.